Just a lone man trying to find ways to justify making Danganronpa content in a world that Danganronpa has abandoned. Kaede, huh? Who was she? What was her deal? Well, she's a cool, spunky girl that wears incredibly comfy-looking sweater vests. She's painfully bisexual, and she talks mad shit. Kaede is a bit of a loose draw in the fan base. People like her in general, but then people don't talk about her that much, so because she's not in a lot of the game and doesn't have the same level of material to work with. Some people have specific issues with her trial and her decision-making in Chapter 1, etc., but, you know, she has fans, but no one really has much dialogue about her. There's some big stuff people are missing out on here. Like I've said in other videos, V3 had the longest development cycle out of all the games and was the most planned out ahead of time. It had the clearest vision for what it wanted to be, it had the fewest rewrites and restructurings of the whole project, and as a result the real intentions behind the writing can be less obvious because they have confidence that the whole package will convey the ideas that they're going for. So, cutting the bullshit, what I'm saying is Kaede is actually a very tightly written character. She was conceived with this idea in mind, taking the whole prologue and the first chapter away from the actual protagonist. It obviously wasn't a decision they made lightly, you know, that they thought it was it was good for one twist and that's it. So, everything you need to know is crammed into this small chunk of time. Just to get out of the way, probably the first half of the video, I want to address the specific grievances people have with the Chapter 1 progression and trial. Now, this is a situation where the established meta of the genre creates this feeling of dissonance. Given the nature of the game, this is probably intentional, but as a result, people instinctively feel that a character has to have done something wrong for a class trial to have happened in the first place. Like every single game, the characters keep insisting the real enemy is Monokuma. Makoto says it, everyone says it. The game is at fault for making people kill each other, and, you know, everyone knows this, all the characters and players, but it at least feels morally complicated because of the conscious actions that were taken by the killers. Even though, you know, we know better, and on some level, we still feel that they did something wrong, or someone did something wrong beyond just obviously Monokuma. Like, they're the ones at fault, and usually they are, sort of, but they can't be blamed too much for making a drastic choice in a drastic situation. But even so, it is understood that they did something selfish. Meta comes into play with genre expectations. Even if it isn't necessarily written into the story intentionally, there are certain things you casually accept about fiction. Like in a lot of genres, you just instinctively feel no major characters will die in most media types. It's an unspoken truth that you still recognize and get used to. The final case of the second Phoenix Wright games throws people off because you get used to this sort of like unspoken expectation that all your clients are obviously innocent. So people have a genre expectation in their gut feeling, and if it is broken strongly and directly, people will understand that they were baited with intentionality, a bait and switch that played off of their expectations. If it's broken but only slightly, people don't realize that their genre biases were being played off of, but it still feels like something is off. And I think that is what happens here, at least on a psychological level. Looking at the facts, Kaede could have only done something maybe marginally better, and even then, we have to recall that these are characters who are working off of limited information, who are also literal children. Everyone was going to die. They could have done what Ryoma suggested. Have someone kill, I guess Ryoma, win, leave, and get help. Which, in and of itself, is a complex subject that isn't even discussed much in the game, but later on we know that there is no chance of escape, no help to be had, and they don't have a discussion on, you know, whether or not the mastermind would have accounted for that fact if they allowed someone to actually escape, blah blah blah. The person who left probably would have died in reality, or Monokuma knew that it wouldn't come to that, so there was no actual plan for a killer to be able to utilize the first blood perk, because it's funny because we as the audience, again, instinctively think that for the game to play out, obviously no one's going to escape this early on, and that there's no chance for someone to go and get help. So we don't even really consider this as a possibility, or that the characters might consider this as a possibility that strongly. Again, another, if our expectations are broken softly instead of overtly, we don't even really stop to think about it that much. We just have this vague awareness that something feels a little weirder than usual. So, Ryoma's plan wouldn't have worked or accomplished anything any better, but they don't know that. But also, they don't know anything. So, a plan to try to kill the mastermind, perhaps higher risk, higher reward. Again, operating on no real information for how things might play out. Not an unreasonable choice or some sort of mistake. Worst case scenario, 2 people die. Well, worst case scenario, going through with that plan, 2 people die, which is already pretty much the best case scenario if they don't escape due to the time limit, so it's a pretty normal choice to be made. We just feel like it isn't because we know through genre tropes that Kaede's plan has no chance of success to kill the mastermind. Theoretically, it could have been worse because it wasn't planned and known by the whole group. Like, someone killed Ryoma, and everyone knew, right? Like, let's say someone killed Ryoma, everyone knew about it, the person who died would be doing so voluntarily, and there's also obviously an ethical question about whether a person who's influenced by depression and suicidal ideation is acting voluntarily or under the effects of mental illness, but in any case, it might be marginally ethically better, you could argue, if the person is doing so willingly, and also there's no chance that someone else takes drastic action at the same time if they all know that this is the plan. Like, theoretically, if someone else had Kaede's same plan, and also happened to murder someone at around the same time, you know, we might have had more victims. Although, of course, Monokuma would manipulate things so that that would never happen. That's not even a genre expectation. We physically know that he manipulates the murders into going down how he wants them to. So, the murder itself, pretty highly justifiable. It's kind of a big moral gray area, but I think the real point of this case, being this way with this particular game, is that, like, the death game itself has to be the obvious enemy. Like, there is a moral gray to it, but nobody strictly did anything wrong, either. The game is just overtly fucking evil. It sets us up, it sets us to see the game as the true antagonist early on, because nobody can really be claimed to have had fault in Chapter 1, but I think that people are so used to finding someone blameworthy, one of the characters blameworthy after each case, to rationalize the deaths and what happened for the case, that they felt that they had to judge Kaede as being in the wrong in some vague, unknowable way. Some people are more bothered by details surrounding the plan, like her decision to act on her own instead of sharing her plan with anyone else, or the fact that she doesn't take the first blood perk afterwards, or her weird, like, I'll hide it from the group afterwards thing, to motivate them into self-reliance or whatever. These are more justified concerns, although some of them are affected by Kaede's characterization that we're going to be talking about in this video. The first blood perk wouldn't have helped, but again, they don't know that. She doesn't know that. Her stated motives for staying behind and not taking the first blood perk was that she felt guilty, that she wanted to try to uncover the truth during the class trial, which, with our player foresight, we know was actually almost a genius move, because there was foul play involved in that case, and Tsumugi had to take a drastic action. She had to break the rules in order to make the game continue. Like, Tsumugi almost lost numerous times throughout Chapter 1. Like, I know it's a joke ending, but the characters could have beaten, and are able to, if you play it well enough, they are able to beat the death road to whatever, and reach the exit in the sewers, you know? Like, with Kaede, like Kaede almost wins numerous times throughout Chapter 1. Almost wins there, could have won there, could have won except for, Tsumugi having to interfere to make the death game continue because no one actually died, and could have won in the trial because it would have been physically possible for them to out Tsumugi as the culprit. So, lots of places where this almost turned out in Kaede's favor. And just, like, the way that it plays out while you're watching it, it's like Kaede sees Rantaro's dead body, the game keeps going, which wasn't what she expected. She's told that he is not the mastermind. They give a really quick, like, okay, raise your hand, thing, like, take the first blood perk, and after just a few seconds, they're like, alright, you missed your chance, that's it, we're doing a trial. So it's not as much of a conscious choice made by Kaede to stay put in the moment. We can see that she's in a kind of state of shock, not sure what's going on when this happens. And, like, it's not like everything that she did and every choice she made was calculated from the beginning. And the fact that we're playing as her is the like, we can watch her choices change as we play the game. Like, we can see her at the start of the investigation start to, like, really, like actually theorize whether or not Rantaro and what was the mastermind and why he would have been there if not the case. We can see her start to form this idea of finding the mastermind in the class trial as they keep investigating. Her plan was not set in stone from the start. We see it take shape throughout the process in her inner thoughts. This doesn't work if you consider it to be this premeditated strategy. We played as Kaede throughout this whole process. What we played is the mental process. It is the justification for her eventual decisions that she wound up making. As for not sharing her plan with someone else or bouncing ideas off of anyone, that's related to her characterization that we'll get into. It's not out of a pure distrust. She did explicitly trust people, like Saihara, like probably a lot of the others. The value of sharing her thoughts is limited, though. Like, maybe she could have gotten a more accurate guess as to who the mastermind was with someone else's brainstorming. Maybe it wouldn't have changed their situation. Like, but it fundamentally doesn't, like, stop them from having to kill someone. Kaede stayed quiet through the trial to, okay, one, like, get Saihara and the others to act on their own is definitely one of those stupid anime explanations, sort of, but, like, the longer the trial lasts, she has more time to investigate the case, and she also isn't going to die as fast, so there's obviously, you don't exactly want to raise your hand and immediately get executed. It's a mishmash of bullshit, but it works well enough. Like, the real answers to some of these concerns obviously come from the character analysis of Kaede, and her anxiety and her toxic positivity, which we will now get into. There's a big disconnect between playing as Kaede and looking at Kaede from the outside, and how she's perceived is, it's made widely apparent the whole first chapter. If you ignore her inner thoughts and only look at how the others see her, hear her, Kaede is a bubbly, carefree, feisty, strong-willed woman with a natural charisma and sense of leadership. I know the Salmon Run thing takes place in, like, this alternate world where they aren't in a killing game, but even still, everyone else's characters, every other character's FTEs are the same as they are in the killing game, so it can't be that different from her real personality. And looking at Kaede's FTEs playing as Saihara, and how differently she comes across from how she is in the main game, The most blaringly obvious point of irony here is that Kaede is not carefree at all, which is the word that is most commonly used to describe her from herself and others. She has crippling anxiety. Most of her internal thoughts are her silently being anxious about something before putting on a false confident face for someone, trying to reassure herself of her constant doubts about the situation, etc. It's difficult to compare because it does feel like this is just how a normal person would be in this horrifying situation. So to the player, it doesn't like, all of her anxiety-related dialogue and internal thoughts doesn't feel like a unique character trait. It just feels like she's a normal person that's like, oh my god, I'm going to fucking die. But when you really compare her intense anxiety moments in her inner thoughts to other characters that you play as throughout the entire series, it is clear that they wrote Kaede to be affected much more heavily by this anxiety. Kaede has a lot of dialogue casually mentioning her values and giving insight into some of her beliefs, and she's just like, why can't we be in a good situation? Like, god damn it, I just want everyone to be smiling. I just want the situation to be good. Why is that not happening? A lot of stuff like that. This is this toxic positivity thing where she's constantly trying to make herself upbeat, force a smile on the face. Sometimes she's clearly lying to people and trying to act happy when we know she's not. Sometimes we see her trying to tell herself that she's happy and confident and like bully her feelings into being her image of herself as a carefree and confident. The most telling part of her character is the attempted escape run. She has this constant toxic positivity, but she pushes it onto the others when she's trying to motivate them into doing the death run over and over. And Oma points this out to her, and that she just keeps saying, like, oh, we'll definitely do it. Next time, guys, let's stay positive, etc. And he's saying that these things are not encouragement, they're emotional strong-arming. And the next day, there's some social conflict, and then Kaede goes back to her room and just starts crying. This is after Monokuma was stepped on, right? There's the goofy scene. No player, the player would obviously not buy that their situation has improved, so they would be naturally on Kaede's side in this. But in their perspective, this is a huge win, that Monokuma is perceived as being destroyed. But Kaede immediately goes crying to her room because of her anxiety and her social tension. She's so anxious that people don't like her, that she just wants things to be good all the time, and when they aren't, she struggles to deal with that. Mr. Peanut Butter from BoJack Horseman is another character that is very similar, deals with toxic positivity, has most of the same traits Kaede has. He wants to be liked by everyone all the time. He's happy and carefree, seeming on the outside. He's very friendly, and he's very positive. He just wants things to be good, and he has difficulty handling when things are not happy. So when there are real problems, he tries to solve them right away, or sweep them under the rug or something, which makes him very dismissive to people's real issues.
A lot of guys in your position wouldn't take gigs like this because they'd be afraid people would make fun of them.
Well, that's dumb. If you care about what other people think, then you're never going to do anything.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you agree. For a second, I was like, why did I say that? That was so dumb. But then you were like, that's right. And I was like, whoo, validation.
Now, this is slightly different because Kaede is like super anxious and very constantly worrying about things, and she just tries to not be. Kaede's dialogue and inner thoughts, and the things that they choose to write with her character in this one chapter, they clearly show that this is her big character thing. I just want everyone to be smiling. Why won't that happen? Why don't things get better? Oh my God, my friends think I'm annoying. Better be more positive so they like being around me. Literally the scene where she's crying in her room after the others are mildly rude to her, because after Monokuma blew up, the other people were celebrating, and Kaede, a little bit of her real personality slipping in, was concerned and worried and anxious, and she's suggesting that things are not better, maybe the problem isn't solved, things won't get better. And this is her real personality slipping in, the constant anxieties of her inner thoughts. Justified, obviously, but this is just how she is. But she lets that slip out around all these people she's starting to feel more comfortable with, and thus letting her real personality come out more. It immediately backfires. A bunch of them criticize her for being too negative, and she runs away to a room crying, and then from that point on puts even more effort into only showing a positive face to people. As soon as Saihara rings the doorbell, she wipes her eyes. She's like, oh, I'm happy, I'm in a good mood, I'm not that lame crying person, I'm not anxious, I'm cool. She even has nervous stimming behaviors, like when she is compulsively cleaning a room while waiting for Shuichi out of anxiety, which that's also linked to her asking Shuichi if he's bothered by uncleanliness or if he's a neat freak in the prologue. She makes a good pairing with Saihara because he's intuitive. He's intuitive enough to tell how she's really feeling under her facade, and he's an outwardly anxious person, as opposed to her being an inwardly anxious person. And he, on the outside, he seems like he's the weaker of the two. He's less reliable, he's like a big fucking whiny loser, but he's being honest with himself and all of his anxieties, and he's expressing his doubts and anxieties so that Kaede can pick up on them and understand them, and they share those traits, and they connect over those similarities. Another obvious irony about their discussion on truth. Saihara is afraid of and is hiding from physical truths, whereas Kaede is hiding from emotional truths, not confronting her real emotions, personality, anxiety, stuff like that. Monokuma's motives are always specifically designed to play off of the person that he's targeting for that chapter, the killer that he wants. In this case, the point of the motives is the fact that there were two motives. First blood perk, and then another additional motive for the time limit and them all dying. It's because he's trying to crack Kaede's anxiety. He's trying to pile up pressure so that she will snap. He even says as much to her in the prologue. He says directly to her, it's fun to see the defiant ones eventually snap and get their hands dirty. Kaede's toxic positivity puts a lot of stress on her because she needs the situation to be good. She needs things to be fixed and for everyone to be happy all the time. So the more conflict he can stir, the more pressure he can apply. And eventually the ultimate fucking pressure of the time limit to all of their deaths, so that he can get at her weakness. Kaede is a self-appointed leader, partly because of her own personality, and partly because everyone else is a worthless sack of lard ass. This is another thing that the whole game is kind of about, like in Chapter 3, where Angie's cult grows in membership, and Shinguji talks about the reasons why cults are successful. V3 has tons of themes around leadership and convincing people to follow you and of stuff. It has a bunch of clear leader figures, from Kaito to Angie, Kaede, Kirumi, Saihara, and the obvious supreme leader Oma, who literally has leader in his fucking title. And all of the different ways these people try and fail or succeed to lead and control and convince people of things. People in a stressful situation, they often want to defer to someone who can tell them what to do. They want to give up their own autonomy. Everyone else was totally comfortable looking up to Kaede, cheering her on, putting all that pressure on her until it interfered with their opinions. Then they decided to criticize her instead of taking responsibility. Kaede mentions that she's always been successful at the piano because she has talent. You know, she thinks, I've always been able to do everything I put my mind to, but maybe that was because I had talent at that, and I don't at this. And this puts pressure on her to have talent at leadership. If only she had the talent at being this leader figure, at solving this problem, she could fix the situation. Of course, Kaede is trying to be the leader, and Monokuma is creating a situation where leadership is impossible. The time limit in effect, the death game afoot, trust is breaking down. Something has to give. No one can come together. So why can't Kaede solve this problem? Is it because she doesn't have the talent to be a leader? Is like she thinks it is? So we get Kaede, right? We understand this. So what makes this character especially clever is that this only works in the way it does because of the perspective thing. Kaede is a character whose outward appearance is made to be happy-go-lucky, carefree, optimistic, while inside she's anxious and stressed most of the time. And this case, and this whole character works because we see both sides. This character only works because we play as her. We see the whole mental process. So anyways, this is also of course tied to the criticisms people have of Trial 1. Her decision to act on her own and not tell anyone else is the result of the disconnect between her toxic positivity and reality. You know, she's very stressed out at a breaking point. She doesn't want to confront the reality of her anxieties. She's fearful of she doesn't face up to those realities very well. She doesn't want the others to think badly of her. She doesn't want to worry anyone else or put stress or fear or suspicion on them. She doesn't want the others to know that she's considering murder, etc. She herself does not want to confront the fact that she's doing this. She wants to view herself as a carefree, confident, like, better person than that, quote-unquote. She doesn't want to think of herself as someone who would commit or consider murder. Obviously, Kaede's internal narration is written around hiding her violent thoughts, like, oh, I dropped what I was holding into the vent or whatever. Like it's written so that we don't instantly realize what she's doing, but the dialogue is of course there. But so it's like a gimmicky thing to hide the truth from the player, but it is also consistent with her characterization. She tries not to think about it. She's trying not to look at that, to see herself as someone committing murder and all of these things of how her personality is not the carefree, charismatic leader that she would like to be. But then we come to the more cosmological question of her character. Kaede presents herself as this carefree, strong-willed, natural leader. Like, they tell her, a bunch of characters, they all, like, pat her on the back like assholes and tell her that she's a natural leader early on. These fucking douchebags are all like, man, you're so great, you're such, like, a charismatic person, that's so fucking awesome. And then they all love her, and then they all put, like, this pressure on her or this expectation of that, and then she immediately tries to play into that. She tries to lead them in the death road thing, she tries to do all this shit and tries to, like, be the leader of this group, but it's not actually that. Like, she's trying to fit into this role, this sort of idealized image of herself, but it doesn't work out that way. They start annoying her, more people start disagreeing with her, you know, she's only the center of the attention right at the start, and where they all fawn at her, but then she kind of slinks into the background despite her constant attempts to take that leadership position. She's, by the end of chapter 1, or like in the middle, before the murder is committed, she's just another person that's there, that everyone else is kind of ignoring, and she's just now off doing her own secret thing with Saihara. Like, not really the center of the group at all. Obviously, a funny part of the ending is that none of them actually have an intrinsic talent that makes them good at something. Kaede is not the ultimate pianist because of a tangible talent that she can rely on. It's because she was brainwashed into thinking that she had talent. It is a fabrication, but it's enough for her to have confidence in herself. It's specifically designed in Chapter 1 that we never see Kaede play the piano. In the whole game, we never do. Her room opens up near the end, her talent room, whatever, opens up near the end of the chapter, but she never stops and plays. We have no idea if she really could play the piano well, just because she has these flashback, like these memories, she believes that she can. It's a deliberate ambiguity on that front. So is being a leader any different? Is there an intrinsic talent or a greatness of character? Or is it just acting with conviction, that believing that you can do something? But, like, despite her glaring weaknesses, she is still kind of the natural leader that she wanted to believe that she was. She is still this mythological figure that inspires the others in the end. V3 is filled with stuff like this, where the fiction becomes the fact, where the lie becomes the truth, blah 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 blah. Kaito is originally presented like this joke hero, like he's cosplaying a fucking anime hero, like Kamen from Gurren Lagann, obviously. And it's obvious that this is a fiction, that this image he's projecting is an exaggeration, it's a falsehood, but then it kind of isn't. It's complex. Kaito is complex, and his good and bad elements, and whether he's just a normal person or actually as fucking epic as he portrays himself to be, is a constant back and forth that we explore, whether or not we can see him as a great man. First it seems no, he's like this goofy, weird, loudmouth guy, he's unreliable, but then it seems like, yeah, he's a real inspiration, he takes care of Saihara, he really picks them up, he's a real, like, he means something. But then it seems like, no, there's certain realities, he's not a mythical hero, he has these faults, you know, it's not, he's still just a normal guy who does good things sometimes, and he's like, but he's not this, like, but, you know, he doesn't seem as impressive, he doesn't seem as mythical of a character. We do this dance with Kaito about if we can think of him as just a guy, or as this truly great man that matches the fictional image he's embodying this whole time with his outward bravado. Well, the fiction can be the fact. Kaito is the parody wannabe hero, but he's also a fucking hero that lives up to that legend. And it's the same with Kaede, and obviously the whole game, fiction to fact. It's bullshit, it's flawed, it's not really real, but when you hit the essence of it, if you look at it this way, when you get down to brass tacks, it is somehow real. That theme is all over V3 in every aspect. Anyways, Kaede is a very tightly written character. This characterization, how it relates to Saihara, and the main themes of the game, and the story structure, and all that stuff is all extremely deliberate and like most of the craft of Chapter 1. And yet during all of this, they still find the time to add this humanity to Kaede. They make her charming and nuanced and funny. She doesn't feel like a character that's written for this sole purpose of expressing these themes about toxic positivity. She has this huge personality with so many traits and quirks and details and natural behaviors despite the tiny amount of time that she's in the game for. And I'm sick of people not appreciating it. So there you go. V3 fucking rules. Like it has its problems, but the things that you could point out as questionable, but then like you think a little harder and then glimpse this magical fucking web where everything is connected and makes perfect sense and it's awesome, and the whole game is like a factory that just produces these themes and these complex examinations of meta. Every fucking orifice of this game is shitting out a way to examine meta every goddamn second. Even when it's not good in a way that also provides a unique examination in how people consume and interpret meta and things that they interpret as being not good or like some other thing, which is the core point, so then it becomes good retroactively. It is this unfucking defeatable thing. It is tightly constructed and analysis heavy, but it also somehow evokes these vague, sweeping, abstract, undefinable truths that you usually only get from looser and more conceptual media. It boggles the mind how it manages to be everything that it is. But okay, that's it for my ranting. See ya.